What it looks like to have all three carburetors bolted up for the first time, replacing the gas carburetors with the AMCO natural gas carbs. And as you can see, if you look at the carbs, they have a very thin profile on them in comparison to the gasoline carburetor. Alright, Joseph is going to drop the center original carburetor so you can do some comparison here. This is the original carburetor that came off the center and was replaced with the AMCO carburetor. And as you can see, if you lift it up, there is a 2-barrel here versus the 1-barrel that we put down. And we talked about our concerns about CFMs. And this is the existing the linkage. We removed the linkage here from this carburetor and installed it at this point here on the AMCO carburetor. And because of the nature of this carburetor is much, if you turn it sideways, it's got a much thicker profile than these thinner AMCO carbs. We had to go ahead and modify using a bracket to extend this out again. That's very important for you to understand, and we extended out the linkage. Okay folks, we're going to go ahead and install the linkage back onto the carburetors. And as you can see, Joseph is pulling out that is the actual, we're going to go in this, we'll go in this hole right here. This is the actual gas pedal linkage that existed on the original car. And it's got 3 individual holes here for adjustment. We're going to put it on the first one, and then he's going to go ahead and put the pin in that hole. If you want to see, that's the basic 3 holes, and there's a pin that goes in the shaft. That keeps the linkage in. The linkage is loose, not real tight. Joseph's going to go ahead and operate the gas pedal so you can see the center carburetor and how it works with the linkage. And that was pretty smooth. We're going to put another spring on there to help it snap back, but that is pretty nice. That is the way the linkage in the center carburetor works. Now we're going to go ahead and attach the back carburetor there with its progressive linkage system. Again, this is the bracket that we extended outward, and Joseph's going to go ahead and put this piece of linkage and swing it back in to the center linkage. Put it in the top one this time. We drilled 2 holes so we could have some adjustment. Okay, now that that's attached, Joseph's going to show you how by pushing the gas pedal in, he'll move the center carburetor to a point to where it kicks in the rear carburetor. Go ahead, Joseph. And there it is. How sweet is that? And this should be the end of the travel. Go ahead and do it one more time. This right here, that is the end of the travel for that carburetor. If I hold it, that butterfly in the rear carb is all the way open, and it still has plenty of travel. And there it is. Alright, we went ahead and we attached the spring that used to be found over here and hooked up to the linkage over here on the original carburetor setup. And now we've got it hooked from the middle carb to the front carb, and this hopefully will give us real good resistance for the pedal. Let's see if I can do this. Maybe even too much. We'll take a look at that and see. We might be able to move it to this point right here so we don't have quite as much spring action on it. Next, we're going to show you how the diaphragm ended up being hooked up. As you can see, Joseph's holding the original that AMCO sent us, which is no more than really gas piping, and that's how they wanted to split the diaphragm from 1 line into 3 lines. And we came up with something a little different, and it's sitting right below it. It may be hard for you to see because it's black, but I'll try to get a better picture of it. I'll back off. This is the manifold. It's an aluminum block, and it was drilled to a 1-inch opening and 3 half-inch openings coming out of it, which is roughly the same thing they were doing with the pipe. And there you have the diaphragm itself. And I'll come around. As you're looking from the fender well down on the diaphragm, we went ahead and manufactured this bracket. Went to a shop and bent up a piece of steel so it would sit on the fender well. Unfortunately, we had to put a couple holes in the fender. We had to do that. and that gave it a real strong. As you can see, I can move the whole car with this by shaking this. And that is the diaphragm and the manifold. And we're going to go ahead and hook up these hoses from here, here, and here into the carburetor here, here, and there. Alright, what we did is we got this hose from AMCO, and we're going to go ahead and use it. We had talked about in the original video going to a braided hose, but we've kind of fallen in love with the black, the real flat black look. So just going to go ahead and position these three hoses. We've got three of them, 1, 2, and 3. And we're going to go ahead and attach them to the carburetors, and we're going to use some clamps. There it is. That is the diaphragm, which takes in about 150 pounds per square inch of gas and reduces it down to approximately 5 pounds per square inch, and sends it out these lines, one going to each carburetor, that being the center carburetor, the front carburetor, and the back carburetor. And as you can see, we've connected the hoses with clamps, and all this equipment that you see so far has been provided by Carb Turbo up in Minnesota. Alright, once again we've got a piece of linkage that's from the original tri-carb setup. We're going to go ahead and use this piece of linkage to connect the back paddle, which you can barely see underneath here. If you look, there's a paddle. Right now I'm using the paddle to move the butterfly in the open position, and we may have to do some adjustments there. They're very easy to adjust. They've got this simple screw right here, and when you turn this nut, or I'm sorry, when you turn this bolt right here, you can actually adjust this paddle and what position it sits in. And we're going to end up connecting this bar, which this bar will then have the front carburetor and the back carburetor in tandem motion. They'll both be open and closed at the same proportion, and the center carburetor will still operate a little differently than the front carburetor and the rear carburetor. We haven't really talked much about tonight is the pressure regulator, which is really from the 3600 psi from the tanks into the engine compartment, and that is it. I went ahead and assembled that. Remember, we spoke of it the other night. This is the pop-off valve for a pressure release, and what we have here is this is a water line, and this is important to understand that when we talked about the gas the other night, when the gas expands, it freezes, so we're introducing water into the system through the heater hose. These two hoses that you see here, one at the bottom and one at the top, what they are is there are actual heater hose from the original car. We took it off the heater core that was on the firewall in the back. We ran it through the regulator on the bottom, and then we returned the water from the top of the regulator back into the firewall, and you can see that right here. We've got this hose right here, and we had it we went ahead and down to the automotive store and picked up a hose that had a couple bends in it so we could return it back into the heater core back here. And so that's how we did our water. And if you track this line right here, it'll go back down through the front engine compartment. Here it is, and goes back into the water pump right here. There's the water pump right there. Once we connect the bottom hose here to the solenoid, these hoses are a flared fitting, so they won't require any plumbing tape. This is another view of the regulator. As you can see, we had to make a bracket and attach it to the firewall, and that is another place that we violated this car and put two holes in the firewall that weren't there originally. And here's that return line back into the heater core. Joseph's going to go ahead and attach that line now to the solenoid.